Hello, and welcome to Sparking Thought. My name is Kyle Gannon.
I'm Tristan Allen.
I'm Jack Chesson.
And today we're going to be talking about the drinking age in America, and whether that should be subject to change, up or down.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about it because I was thinking about why college and students and teenagers sort of have a bad rep when it comes to drinking and using other types of drugs. And I feel like part of the reason why people our age, people a little bit older than us, use alcohol and drugs so immaturely and recklessly, is because I think there's an aspect to it that's sort of the rebellion of breaking the law and drinking, and sort of going against the man and and our parents at the same time. And I feel like if the drinking age, that could be combated, if the drinking age was maybe lowered a little bit to at least like 19, where most of college students then can legally drink, and then maybe it takes part of that rebellion that they're doing, and makes it more part of the culture. It's sort of like sex education. When people are educated about sex from an early age, they're less likely to be reckless and more likely to not make mistakes. So I think it can be looked upon with a similar light.
And I have a statistic here that reaffirms your point, Jack. It says 22% of college students under 21 are heavy drinkers, compared to 18% who are over 21. So it shows that there is, or it shows me at least, what I take from it is that there is an aspect of the rebellion, the fact that it's illegal makes it kind of fun to do, and I feel like that shows here when it says there's a whole 4% who who's stop being heavy drinkers once they are legally allowed to drink.
Well, I'm not sure if you're interpreting that in the way I would. For instance, in the same way that a child, you got an 8-year-old child and you give them a bag of Halloween candy, unmonitored, they're going to eat tons of that. They're going to eat everything one night and get a stomach ache and be unhealthy. However, if they're monitored and they're only eating the right amount, eventually they may become mature enough to where they get older, they'll recognize, and this is hopefully, because I know I probably would still wolf through all of my Halloween candy in one night, but hopefully they'll become mature enough to understand that if they eat all of it in one night, they're going to end up in a situation with a stomach ache, and they're not going to enjoy it. It's the idea of foresight. I think that a lot of this stems from immaturity, and it kind of seems arbitrary that it's at 21. I don't really have an answer for why that's where it separates. Maybe it's just kind of a spread. For instance, obviously as you get older, based on what I'm saying here, that the older and more mature you get, the less help you need, or the more you understand how to control your own consumption of something that's harmful for you in excess. And therefore, if you're over 21, as you get older, you're better with it. When you're younger, you're worse with it, hence the statistics. But I don't know if it's so much rebellion. I think there's also, the issue is we would expect them to be mature by that point, but unfortunately, that's just not the case. I think there are a lot of just immature people in our society today, which is, it's caused by, I think, a lot of factors. But it's also exacerbated by the fact that once they get to college, they're largely unmonitored. And many of them have cars and means of self-propulsion so that they can get these things, and they have friends. They're in a society, they're in kind of a community where they have 22-year-olds and 21-year-old friends who can get them alcoholic beverages, and therefore it's quite easy for them to get their hands on it and abuse it because they don't have the maturity to refrain and say, well, I've got to make sure that I don't get alcohol poisoning. In addition, just on that note, I also, Jack, you said you wanted to lower it to something like 19. I'm assuming that's not a finalized number, because that just sort of seems arbitrary to me. Why 19? Why not 18, 16? 18 and 16 actually make more sense to me. 18 being when you would go to college or when you legally become an adult. 16 being the same, that coincides with when you can,
right.
16, 9 months when you can get your license.
Well, I think I picked, because a lot of high school students are 18. And all high school students are somewhere around 16. So if you're 16 and able to drink, I think that's a little bit unsafe. And also, if you're 18 and you're able to get alcohol, then you're able to give alcohol to a 14-year-old freshman. So that's a little bit dangerous.
Well, yeah. But what I'm saying though is, you're basing this on the idea that people are going to be too immature to be able to understand how to use that drug correctly. But the issue we're seeing is that 18 they'll be able to understand it by then. But that's still shown to people who are under 21 are using that just as much.
I guess my thinking was that if there's less of a stigma around it, then people will be more responsible. If it's
but
looked
the lower
upon,
you go with the age, then there seems to be less of a stigma. And the idea of making it available to more people becomes less
because
of a
you're right.
stigma.
In Europe and like in Italy, I think the drinking age is 16 in Italy, and they have very much a different problem with drugs and alcohol. But I think there is less of a stigma in Europe about drinking at a young age, and I think they have a different problem than us. But what I fear is just going immediately to 16. That's sort of a drastic, that's a paradigm shift from 21 to 16. So maybe...
Are you saying that it would be like you'd stop off at 19 and then go to 16 once you were sure that was like a good working thing?
I'm not necessarily saying that we even need to change the drinking age. I'm suggesting that there's a problem, there's a stigma around drinking, and maybe changing the drinking age could help fix that and make people more responsible.
And while we're on the subject of maturity, or I guess we were a second ago, so I want to bring this up. I have a question for my fellow podcasters. Why is it that at the age of 18 you can buy tobacco, which is a drug technically, you can join the military, so risk your life, I guess, and you can vote for our next leader, but you can't purchase alcohol? I don't know why.
Sure.
Why is that? Why do you think?
Well, based on the public, because I got public education, therefore I got the kind of health class, which is standard throughout all public schools in America, or was when I took it. And the reason they gave us was that at 20, until you're 21, your brain is not fully developed. Now, I find that interesting again, with especially the idea that you can choose to make the other things, like you can choose to smoke a drug, but the idea was that none of those are direct, deteriorate your brain. For instance, smoking doesn't. Nicotine acts on your brain, but it doesn't matter. It's not subject to this development in your brain. How it acts. It always addicts. And I guess it's probably the echoes of drafting, the ages of drafting in young soldiering. That is the draft, or is the allowance and permittance into the military at 18. But 21, because overuse of alcohol can literally destroy your brain and brain cells, is I think that's what it is. And stunting the growth of your brain before is I think the reason they've got that there. So I think that one's actually cut and dry. I know that's used as a really kind of a strong rhetoric where people like to say, well, look at all the other things that you can do. But that one I was actually able to, in terms of reasons for the drinking, I was able to get on board with that one more easily, just because it's got such a direct chemical and physiological relationship to the substance.
Yeah, I guess maybe what I'm suggesting is that we should have had some foresight, and maybe when we set a drinking age, made it a little bit younger. But I don't know. I still feel like if it was more part of our culture, people would not abuse it as much. That's really the basis of my argument.
Yeah, but culture doesn't. I don't think culture is dictated by laws. So, for instance, you're looking to go about it by changing the law and how the law perceives how we drink. So, essentially, in rebellion of the law, your idea is to just lower the law, except for that the idea of rebellion is always true in an immature person, because the idea is they're immature, and therefore they rebel against the law. Lowering the requirements is not going to change whether the people who are under the law are going to be immature. And while I think it could do... I suspect, when you change something, you generally see, for an input, you see an output, and you definitely see change. I just don't know if it, be the one you wanted to see, a decrease in underage drinking. Well, you'd probably, you definitely see a decrease in underage drinking, seeing that you lowered the drinking age. But a decrease in excessive drinking and alcohol abuse, not minors, I still haven't get used to how he'd put this, but a decrease in alcohol use by young adults. But I think the issue really comes down to how you're taught to drink by your family. And you mentioned paradigm shift, which I really like, because paradigm doesn't really apply to laws. It's how we do things culturally and societally. And I think, honestly, the issue is kind of a fine line where they're just for every person that you can find that has never been allowed to touch alcohol, you can find one where the parents just let their children have alcohol on a whim. where, you know, it's like, well, what is this one? You know, the child will ask, well, what does this taste like? And the parent will just give them that alcohol and the alcoholic beverage, and they'll try it. And unfortunately, one kind of creates that intrigue in the sense of, you know, that the parent says, don't go in that closet, and the kid wants to go in that closet out of that rebellious nature. And the other one just has bred a kind of sense of disregard and a kind of unappreciative psychology of, you know, it's just alcohol and it's just another beverage, as opposed to, no, this is something that can do you harm and needs to be taken into consideration and had in moderation.
Well, you gave two ends of the spectrum. I think what's important is that maybe, you know, I think some parents, what they choose to do is that they choose to, once the child gets to a certain age, like 16 or 17, you know, they start letting them have like a glass of wine at dinner or something, and they say, this is the way to drink, you know, responsibly.
Okay.
This is how it sort of enhances things.
So,
and that's maybe the responsible way to do that.
Jack, it sounds to me like your I guess stance is not so much lower the drinking age, but it's more educate younger people about, you know, drinking responsibly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
so I feel like instead of I guess to solve the problem the way that you seem to, or the way that I have perceived that you seem to think, is just teach from a younger age. Teach high schoolers and young adults what drinking is and what it can do to your body, and you know, give evidence. And so not so much lower the drinking age, but just educate from an early age. And you brought up sexual education in the beginning, so something more like that, like in 8th grade, you guess you start talking about, you know, alcohol and whether it's, you know, what it does to your system and the harms and I guess potential benefits it can have.
So, well, I mean, but the thing is, they had that epiphany many years ago. I took this course and learning all about what it does to your brain. I watched all the appropriate videos in 6th grade. And already by 7th and 8th, people were coming into school with vodka instead of water in their water bottles. It really cannot be done. I don't think this is something that can be monitored by state. I think the problem is it's so ingrained into our culture that it's not something that shifting little kind of trivial things like shifting laws is going to affect. And the issue is, I don't see a way in which a comprehensive law can really augment the way we use alcohol, especially in young adults. I think actually a lot of times they grow out of it, but what we're looking to do obviously is to keep young adults, especially from getting alcohol poisoning, addicted, and killing themselves. But that really falls to everybody at their home, and the problem is, you know, you kind of end up with a domino effect where if one group of, you know, you have one generation that was immature and kind of didn't realize how to use alcohol, then you kind of have branching out as you get, you know, into the next generations of their offspring then do the same things. But I think a paradigm shift is a really good term to use here, because it really is. It's something that has to happen culturally. It's something that has to happen, you know, and it actually, this is kind of the thing that happens in other countries where there's not that much concern with, you know, letting even an 8-year-old have like a small glass of wine with their dinner on special occasions, because it's just, they're teaching them how to have it. And by the time they reach an age, it's the wine is kind of a symbol of tradition and procedure, and it's not something that's either just another drink or something that's forbidden and kind of special and intriguing.
Yeah, they reach that sort of middle way successfully, I think. So,
closing thoughts. I think I just offered mine.
Yeah, I would. You know, I think you've convinced me pretty well that maybe lowering the drinking age might not be the best course of action, but I stand that I think something needs to be
absolutely
a cultural change of some sort. You know, would definitely be beneficial.
I agree. Yeah, I think you both summed it up perfectly. It's a paradigm shift needs to happen, and when it does, I think we'll be in the clear.
Yeah, and perhaps at a later date we can talk about what that might be, because there's plenty of talking about, you know, designating what needs to happen, but not enough about really specifying that. But we'll hopefully cover that at a later date. And until then, thank you. You've been listening to Sparking Thought. We'll see you next week.